All right, I'm back with my next video. This is the part 3 to the Enlightenment playlist. And this is going to be a very special video because it's going to show you, if you saw my first 2 episodes about enlightenment, it's going to show you what the path to enlightenment is actually going to look like, what it's going to feel like, the type of things you're going to experience based on my personal story with it, doing self inquiry and practicing spirituality. And I'm super excited to give you guys a little story time as to how I achieved no self states and experienced a little bit of enlightenment myself, and kind of the roadblocks and bumps that I experienced as well leading up to this state. So let's start at the very beginning here. So when I was younger, up until the age of 16, I was super materialistic. I definitely fell into the materialist paradigm, as to say that my belief systems were that this universe and world was a raw physical universe made up of matter, and I was very scientifically minded. And that kind of was just bled into my lifestyle normally. And then I started participating in some activities that kind of led to my first awakening experience. And when you're pursuing enlightenment, it's very difficult to actually start to believe that some of this stuff could be true. You kind of need blind faith in order to start understanding that this might be something realistic and something attainable. Because if a lot of you are scientifically minded people, you're not really going to believe this, just like I did. So it takes almost a pre-awakening experience to even give yourself enough blind faith in order to start taking this practice seriously. And like I said, I was doing a lot of, let's just say, spiritual activities at the time. And one night, after doing one of these spiritual activities, just really for fun, I was lying in bed and I was trying to fall asleep. It was probably early hours of the morning. And as I was laying there, all of a sudden, something kind of snapped in my mind. And I kind of shot up out of bed and I started to look around my room and I said to myself, what if reality is not what it seems? And I guess you could categorize that into the awakening to non materialism insight. Because normally you're walking around and, as you're bumping into things, you see like the ground or the sky or even walls, and you might like knock into these walls, bang them, and be like, "What are you talking about? Like, nothing is made of spirit here. Like, everything is very hard, physical, solid matter." Like I could, if I put my hand on a table or I like punch a table, my fist is not going to go through a table. Everything is very real. It is very hard, physical matter. And that's something that a lot of people believe. But this first awakening experience that I had, and you won't really realize this until you experience it, is I kind of realized, I was like, what if the world is not physical matter? It's very possible now, to my knowledge after this insight, that the whole scientific materialist paradigm might just be a belief system that the majority of people voted on democratically. So if the majority believes that everything is physical and the scientific, paradigm is right, that's why everyone just kind of bought into this idea, when in reality, it's not actually a physical fact, but this is entirely almost like a religion that everyone almost bought into. And then so that was kind of my awakening experience. It gave me enough blind faith to start these exercises, because before I wouldn't really have had enough faith that something like this was actually possible to attain. So you need something to almost jumpstart that blind faith. So you start really taking this work seriously. Otherwise, you're going to believe it's just a bunch of hocus pocus and that none of it is really true. So that started my real spiritual awakening, where I started looking around and I started really trying to find the answers as to what this awakening kind of meant or it kind of felt like. And I started getting on YouTube a lot and watching a lot of YouTube videos. And I found some videos talking about this concept of enlightenment and how to attain it by self inquiry. Now, a lot of the videos were along the lines of enlightenment, like I said, being some hocus pocus, poetic, not really real, solid thing. Maybe almost like someone experiencing freedom in some way or starting meditation or becoming calm. But I came across a few videos that taught me that enlightenment is something physical that could happen to you. It is something real. It is something not hocus pocus, but it's something that, saints and sages have known about for thousands of years. And there is something actually real hidden deep down that if you look beyond all the BS out there on the internet, there's a lot of people who actually know that this is and understand that this is a real concept. So I found some, I guess, gurus online that I trusted because they took their work very seriously and they were pointing to something that you could achieve directly. And I just kind of ran with it. And I started watching a lot of videos about the enlightenment and awakening experience. And that's when I came across all the methods that you could use to attain enlightenment. And I was a good thinker. I wasn't a great meditator, but I was definitely a good thinker. So I kind of started using self inquiry as my primary method to attain enlightenment. So that was between my first awakening experience where I realized the possibility that materialism could be false. That was probably when I was maybe mid high school. And then I really started taking actual enlightenment practice that I saw from these gurus. I started taking that seriously when I was in college, probably around a freshman in college. So I started doing the self inquiry, and the self inquiry um, steps I made a video on my last video. Go check that out. I'm not going to explain it all here, but I started doing all of these self inquiry practices for a little bit. I guess you could say around 3 years or so. And I remember, we'll fast forward to when I was a senior in college. So I was a senior in college and I had been doing all these practices, like I said, and I really was trying to get to the core of this experience. I know that this wasn't some intellectual insight you had, but it's almost like a physical transformation that happens to your body and mind. And as I was asking myself all these profound insights and doing all the self inquiry and whatnot throughout, I guess you could say, the 2 weeks following up to that actual first enlightenment experience, I definitely started to notice some changes occurring. Now, when you're getting close to your first enlightenment experience after doing self inquiry for a while, you start to notice some kind of odd bodily sensations occurring. Like you've almost noticed that there's been unconscious stress held in your head, like almost like muscles in your head or your brain. You notice that they've actually been flexing almost with stress inside of them for so long, so many years. You didn't even know that was there before. But once you start doing these practices and getting close to enlightenment, you start to get these feelings of release, releases of pressure in your head, and they were coming quicker and quicker every day. So I knew something was happening. And I also kind of started to read between the lines and see that the self actually wasn't something that I could pinpoint anywhere. So as I started to dig deeper and deeper and deeper into self inquiry, I kind of had that feeling that something was coming and I didn't know what it was, but it gave me enough power to really lock in and grind these exercises because I knew that something was happening soon. And that took about, I guess, 2 weeks from that point until I had that actual experience. Now, what was that actual experience? Well, one day I was walking to class like any normal day. I was walking to class senior year, and all of a sudden I asked myself this question because I would do self inquiry from the moment that I left my house because I commuted to college. So I'd leave my house and I would drive an hour to school every morning. And so I would do self inquiry in the morning for that hour as I was driving to school. And then I would give myself the hour ride home to listen to music or whatever after I got my, self inquiry chores out of the way. So I was driving to school and I got out of the car and I was walking to class on campus. And the question that really set everything off all at once was I said to myself, if me is a thought, then who or what is having that thought? Because I realized that if all that me was just a thought or an idea, then I couldn't be having that thought if the concept of I was an idea. And as soon as I asked myself that question, all of a sudden, I started to disappear. And I'm not saying something poetic here. I'm talking physically, I started to disappear from my body. And you would think that at first you might be like, oh, whoa, this is kind of cool, or something like that when you experience that feeling for the first time. But honestly, when that happens to you the first time, your first initial reaction is to go, whoa, 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 and freak out and basically say to yourself, stop this now, because you didn't know what you were getting yourself into for all these years of self inquiry or whatever these practices were. You had absolutely no idea what you were getting yourself into. And when it finally happens, the one thing that you were most solid about in life, which is your existence, starts to disappear. And that is the overall scariest experience that you could ever experienced for the first time, when you had no idea that this was what enlightenment was going to be like. So my first reaction was, stop this now. I am walking to class right now. I cannot be disappearing in the middle of a lecture. So I immediately just cut it off right then and I started freaking out. And I remember that the sensations that occurred during that time, like I said, it's like almost you feel like this ghostly outline of like a soul is wearing your body, like your hands and your head and, the rest of your body. It's almost wearing the body like a glove. But that ghostly outline, almost that concept in my head of a soul started to disappear. So that soul started to physically disappear from my body. It's not like an out of body experience where like you're seeing yourself from almost like a third person perspective. No, it's like that entire soul that you felt was inhabiting the body, your sense of self, you think you fit comfortably inside this body, you think you are inside of the skull somewhere. When that starts to disappear, you get the physical sensation of leaving the body, and it almost feels like, and this is kind of a morbid way to put it, it almost feels like the body turns into a carcass. And so it was almost like a carcass was walking around my school campus, and I was no longer inside of it anymore. And so I cut it off. I stopped the self inquiry and I vowed to never do that ever again. I was floored by the fact that this was something that was actually real, that could happen. Because in the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm just going to do this self inquiry and not really take it seriously. It's just a fun little spiritual activity that I can do because I'm into it. I love watching videos about it and we'll just play around. And then, like I've said before, curiosity killed the cat, meaning curiosity killed the ego, and I actually experienced what it was like for the self to dissolve. But that day, I remember looking around and I just remember feeling this experience that I hadn't felt since I was a child. It was almost like, once the self dissolves, all the colors become super neon and whatnot, but it's almost like your body becomes transparent, and there's almost this transparent, almost like wind or essence that feels like it's blowing through your body, because you're not inside the body anymore. You become the space, the empty space in which your body is sitting in. So that was interesting to say the least, because I hadn't felt that way since I was, a very young child. And I remember after I left, after I walked into my lecture, I was looking around at every single person inside of that lecture. And I started to see everyone's bodies. Well, actual bodies, but I started to realize all of the students' bodies in that lecture. I started to see them, the bodies, as puppets in a way where they were almost animatronic, like rag dolls. And it was like I was seeing the universe, this empty space that didn't belong to anyone, was almost shoving its hands up these people. It was turning these bodies of all these students into puppets. So that's another Enlightenment experience that you'll kind of see once you start these activities is you'll feel like the universe is puppeting every single person. So it's like, imagine during this awakening experience that you realize that the universe is using all of the bodies, the physical bodies of everyone you know and love, and it's using them as a puppet. And it's, in my case, I realized that the universe was using my body as a puppet, and it was pretending that it forgot that it was actually consciousness. And so this whole entire life has almost been a play where the universe is pretending that it's a human, pretending that it's a self. It's puppeting around my body and everyone else's body. And it's playing this little game where it's pretending to forget that it's the universe. So then it can awaken itself and then remember that it's actually pretending. So that's a little bit of a scary feeling when you see everybody you know and love as puppets and that they actually don't exist anymore at all. And it's just the universe puppeting everybody's bodies around, making them walk, making them talk, making them do different actions and everything like that. Even though there's no one inside the bodies anymore. So not only was I seeing myself as nothing, but I was seeing everyone else as nothing. They were just empty bodies walking around, talking, doing actions that the universe was controlling. So that was my first experience of seeing that free will didn't exist anymore because there is no you. The universe is basically using everybody's body as a puppet. So I really didn't like that experience because it was very freaky to see everyone else. Everyone is almost like an animatronic puppet in a way. And so I went home and like I said, I decided not to really do this ever again. I was like, I've seen everything I saw. This was not some beautiful experience where everyone was one and we could all hold hands and sing and love each other. It was like, no, everyone was gone. My body was completely transparent. There was nobody existing anymore. The universe was empty and everyone you know and love is just gone. And that was my introduction to enlightenment, to realize that it was not this beautiful thing that I thought that it was going to be. So then I think I left it alone for a while. And then when the ego comes back eventually after a couple weeks or something like that, and you're fully back in the illusion of self, you start psyching yourself out and saying, that experience was just that wasn't really real. I was confused, or like, did that actually happen, or was I just being really dramatic and I don't really remember if like it was that scary or that realistic. You almost start to forget. So you get curious and you start pursuing it again, because this is the craziest truth that you can discover about the entire universe, and it answers a whole lot of questions pretty seamlessly. So I would do the self inquiry every once in a while. And I guess this was like on the weekends or, during the summer a little bit later on, but I would do some more of these self inquiry exercises. And I remember that one day I was lying in bed, maybe like 2 in the morning, and I started to feel that disappearing feeling happening from my body. But this time it was a lot stronger. It literally felt like the consciousness that I believe was localized in the body and the head, it started bleeding out of my body and I started merging into the universe. Like I couldn't imagine my face anymore. I just started to ooze out and bleed into the empty space. And you feel a lot of the muscles in your body start to relax, which makes you believe that there's not a central self. Because when you have a lot of unconscious, like tightness and pressure that builds up in your head and your back and the top of your shoulders, that's where the ego kind of lives in your body, and that's where you almost feel anchored to your body in these points of pressure in your head. So when they start to relax, and I mean like dramatically relax, I don't mean like just like simple muscle relaxation. I mean like it almost feels like all the muscles in your head and your shoulders and your neck and all this just like turn to complete butter, and there was no central point inside your head which you are located anymore because it relaxes so hard. So I remember I was almost bleeding out into the universe and I couldn't even picture my face anymore. And I was like freaking out. Like I was like walking down, I was like pacing around my room. I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I've never experienced this. I don't know what's happening. I mean, I did know it was happening, but I didn't want to believe it because it was so scary. Because I was like, what's it going to be like if I'm not in my body anymore? I literally wanted to run out of the room and tell my parents what was happening to me. But I was like, no, I can't do that because if I start freaking out, I'm going to have to go to like a psych ward or something like that. And I can relax, I can be calm, and I understand that this is happening because a lot of people don't actually understand that this is happening. Some people have freak accident, enlightenment or awakening experiences. Like I've talked to people before and I know stories of people who have just picked up meditating as a hobby, just got really, really good at it. And then all of a sudden this happened where they completely disappeared from their body and they thought they were going insane because they had no prior enlightenment knowledge inside of their minds as to what this was. And so they freaked out because they didn't have any explanation for it. At least I had an explanation. I knew what I had gotten myself into. I knew what was happening. So that was enough to help me stay calm. But I remember I almost, during that experience, my mind felt sharper than ever before. It was almost like for the past 15 years of my life, there had just been a bunch of cloudiness in my mind, not really much presentness and whatnot, almost like someone had been clicking the fast forward button for the past, like I said, 15 years of my life. And then finally, when this experience happened to me, it's like everything paused and I was very present. Once all of this tightness and pressure and tension leaves your body, you start to be able to be a lot more physically active. You don't know how much energy it takes up when you're stressing and all of the muscles in your head and, like I said, your shoulders are tightened. So I was like, doing anything I could to kind of keep a grasp on reality so I didn't bleed out of my body anymore in a way. So I remember I was like, I got down on the ground, I started doing a bunch of push-ups, and I did like 100 push-ups with absolutely no problem, and I wasn't fatigued. So I stopped doing push-ups because I was freaking out. I was like, "How did I just do 100 push-ups? Like, that makes absolutely no sense. I've never been able to do that before with, like, such ease. Like, how am I getting this, like, superhuman strength that's very apparent all of a sudden?" And, it felt like, it started to feel like my body was about 2 feet in front of me, like, very, very, very seriously, like, my body was 2 feet in front of me, and that's a very freaky feeling because, it's not like my body was in a different location, but it's the fact that my when I started to what I actually am, which is consciousness, started to separate from the body kinda like this, I wasn't located in the body anymore. So as I was almost splitting apart from the body, it felt like the body was almost in front of me, and I wasn't in it anymore, and that was a very terrifying feeling as well. So every time this happened, I would start freaking out for a little bit, and then I would stop. I would stop all of the self-inquiry all at once because it was always too much for me, and that's something that I struggle with, is to figure out how to keep calm when this enlightened experience is happening, because all of it sounds very terrifying. But like I've described, once you get past that hump of the ego keeping like trying to keep a hold on everything, because the ego wants to survive, if you can finally let go from that, there's a whole lot of positive benefits that come out, like dropping attachment, dropping anxiety, dropping depression, dropping stress, dropping rumination, everything like that. Fear of death, dropping fear of death. But that ego just wants to hold on so tight because it's the thing that you know the most. That one consistent thing that's been there your entire life is your sense of self. And when that starts to dissolve, your entire world just gets flipped upside down completely. And I remember as I was trying to sleep, it messed with my sleep a lot, because when you, like I said, your body completely relaxes and all the little micro muscles in your head and your face and your neck and your back all relax, you start to feel like you're not in the body because you're not centered. You're almost not anchored to that like unconscious pressure that you never realized was there. You're not anchored to that anymore. So it's almost like, for the past however many years old you are, for me, it was like 21 or something like that. For the past 21 years, I've always put the body to sleep with me still inside of it. So now that I wasn't really inside my body anymore, I was like, this is almost kind of a new skill I have to learn. I have to put the body to sleep without being inside of the body anymore. So it's almost like trying to like, you know, put like a baby to sleep or something like that. Like you're not, I mean, you're in control of it, but like you're not inside this body anymore that you have to put to sleep. So that's like, that takes a lot to get used to. This is a very interesting, weird feeling to have, that you now are in charge of putting the body to sleep that you aren't in anymore. So I didn't want this to keep happening to me. Every time I went too far, I would freak out. And I started talking to some people that I met online who've had experiences like that before. And I want to read to you a post that I made on a forum talking about this experience. I wrote this post as that enlightenment experience was happening to me. So here it is. As I lay awake at 3:14 a.m., I cannot sleep, for I am not tired. 3 years of inquiry led to a spontaneous 40% awakening that scared the living shit out of me, and I promised to never do it again. Yet my mind is the definition of curiosity killed the cat. This has happened a few times at night now, deeper each time, assuming it is because my brain relaxes when I'm trying to fall asleep, but instead of sleeping, boom, detachment from the body. But what comes next is indeed very present. All of the bodily stress, stress in the face, sinuses, back, shoulders, muscles, and craziest of all, the brain just disappears. It is as if I have been flexing my brain ever since the end of childhood and cannot find a way to stop until now. To actually be able to unflex your brain is the calmest feeling, and all of those pesky background noises and thoughts just disappear, and you can focus so much more greatly in the present moment. I am not tired because of how relaxed my brain is. I'm seeing things the way I did as a kid again. Stress is physically not allowed in the state. Maybe I will go further, we shall see. I have to surrender more first. Sometimes I'm afraid to let go. And one guy was saying how, like I told you, he did some meditation and then he felt himself disappearing from his body. And he was giving me a bunch of pointers as how to stay grounded and not freak out. And at that point, I had neglected a lot of areas of my personal development. So before you start enlightenment, you need to get a lot of those foundational things um, completed first in your life. If you're homeless and living on the street and everything like that, or if you have a lot of traumas or deep emotional problems or something like that, or a lot of self-esteem issues or things you need to work on to complete first as a person, maybe start finding a career, get like a career off the ground. All those things need to come kind of first before you start pursuing enlightenment and everything like that. So, what those awakening experiences taught me is that I am not fully ready to let go of the ego. I feel like the ego should be built up first until you are exactly where you want to be. Build up that ego until there's kind of nothing to build up anymore because you've completed all these necessary tasks in order to be, a man or a woman and whatnot. And then once your ego is built up, I know there's a quote online that says, like, my first half of my life should be dedicated to building the ego. And then the second half of my life should be dedicated to tearing it down. So use that, like I said, first half of your life maybe doesn't take that long. Use the first half of your life to become the man or woman that you want to be like in society. Check off all those things off your bucket list that you need to become a proper man or woman, whatnot. Maybe that's like I said, actually having basic safety and security and appropriate living spaces, or getting your life planned out by starting school or taking those steps to get a job first. Or maybe that's problems with relationships, or maybe you have issues attracting a partner or something like that you want to figure out first, maybe have some success with that. And then once you kind of get all those basic surface level, real, tangible human problems out of the way, and you finally built this life that you want to live, that's when you can come back to enlightenment and start doing that spiritual, lofty, heavy stuff like enlightenment. So that's kind of what I did. And I took a pause from it for maybe like a year or two, something like that. I did a lot of rough personal development, because with personal development, there's like this real sparkly, fun side. There's like enlightenment and meditation and contemplation and grounding in nature and all this cool, like sparkly, shiny stuff. But none of that stuff is really going to hold any power for you if you don't get that first half, that complete other half finished first, which is all of that shadow work. You need to do all of that ugly, gross, looking in a mirror, changing the hard, gritty parts of your life first, having a lot of discipline for the stuff that you don't want to do. That's kind of that like ugly, gritty side to self development that you need to complete first. So I was forced to face all that shadow work for a year or two, which was very rough. And then finally, now that I got out of it, I'm starting to get back into enlightenment and all these exercises and whatnot. And I've had a lot of success so far. I'm not in an enlightenment state right now, but I'm definitely trying to be, because I finally, like I said, done all that shadow work. And now I am back and ready to conquer this enlightenment stuff, because because I got all of that chore stuff, that gritty chore self-development part out of the way. And I'm back to contemplation and visualization techniques and meditation, and I'm practicing it like never before. I've had a lot of time. I have a job that I like, and I'm making these videos at the same time. So I'm having a consistent income while also having a great schedule of making videos and having a plan that doesn't stress me out to do that. And so I'm very set and safe in my life right now. And I have a good feeling of where I know this is going to take me. And so I'm back on that. Enli- so I'm back on my enlightenment path. And I've already been seeing a bunch of glimpses of the truth of no self. I've been having little cracks in my psyche, little enlightenment experiences here and there. I'm kind of ready to face that dark, scary side of it, because, like I said, this is the most important thing you could do. Basically, what I'm trying to say is what you and what most humans think is the ultimate aim of existence, the highest purpose in life that humans can have, is to just experience some entertainment or to help people or to travel the world. But nothing comes close in comparison to discovering your existential nature and finding out what you really truly are and what the whole reason for life, universe, existence, and reality actually is. Those are the real points to true self-actualization. To find the truth of the universe and to understand why we're actually here is in fact the greatest good that you could do for yourself or other people. Your days are numbered and every breath brings you closer to the end. So I highly suggest into pursuing this work and discovering and experiencing enlightenment for yourself because your time is running out.